Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Brooklyn Historical Society's virtual program, Liquid Vacation, where today we'll be discussing the history and cultural significance of tiki cocktails. My name is Bo Mendez. I'm the manager of programs and digital communications here at Brooklyn Historical Society. And normally I would have the distinct honor and privilege of welcoming everybody to our beautiful space in Brooklyn Heights. But of course, as with everything else, essentially, we are closed up for the moment out of concern for everybody's safety, but we look forward to welcoming you back soon. A little bit about us before we get to the meat, or rather the juice, I suppose, of today's discussion. I'd just like to share a little bit about who we are and what we do at BHS. We are a over 150-year-old institution that is dedicated to preserving, celebrating, and sharing the history of Brooklyn. And you might be asking yourself, well, why is Brooklyn Historical Society doing something on tiki cocktails? Well, the truth of the matter is, while we like to talk about things that are local and focus a lot on what has happened here within the borough of Brooklyn itself, many things that have come through Brooklyn will eventually tie to other historical trends that are national and sometimes even global. So that gives us an opportunity to really branch out and be agile with the stuff that we talk about in our programs. And quite frankly, it's the middle of July. It's really hot. And this is a very fascinating subject that might give us an opportunity to cool off a little bit. In just a moment here, I will be welcoming all of our esteemed panelists to start this discussion. But first, I just want to share a little bit about a prop that I brought with me. This is called a beachcomber. It's 1 o'clock, but as we all know by now, time is a social construct, which is a very fancy and academic way of saying it's 5 o'clock somewhere. I just wanted to raise a glass to everybody for coming to this afternoon, raise a glass to all of our panelists and say that I chose this particular drink because its name, Beachcomber, invokes, of course, Don the Beachcomber, but it actually appeared on a menu in Trader Vic's, who we have the honor of hosting, the person who's kind of the custodian of that legacy, Yves Bergeron, and that is a kind of an homage to both of the Marvel and DC, if you will, the Fender and Gibson of tiki culture, these two larger-than-life personalities who, in a lot of ways, helped shape this thing that we're going to be talking about a little bit. So without further ado from me, I'd like to bring on some people who will probably tell me how this maybe is not the best tiki drink, or maybe all the history that I've read about it is wrong. In other words, I'm saying that we're going to bring on people that are far more qualified to talk about this subject than me. So let me first introduce our moderator, Robert Simonson, who has written for the New York Times on the subject of cocktails and cocktail culture, as well as a number of other publications. He's also the author of 4 books on the subject of cocktails, including most recently, The Martini. So please join me in welcoming to the virtual stage, Robert Simonson. Robert, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Of course. Thank you for being here, and I will leave things in your capable hands. Cheers to you, and enjoy the program, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on this sunny and balmy afternoon here in Brooklyn. I am happy to introduce the 3 panelists on this seminar. And I think we're quite fortunate. This seminar is kind of special, in my opinion, in that the panelists represent 3 major chapters in the long history of tiki, which is about 90 years old at this point. We have someone who represents the origins of the drink genre. We have someone who embodies the revival of the tiki world in modern times, and we have someone who represents the continuation of that style of bar. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Yves Bergeron, who is the granddaughter of Victor Bergeron, who we all know better as Trader Vic's, the person who invented that bar, which is perhaps arguably more responsible for spreading tiki culture and tiki drinks around the world more than any other bar. And she is still with the family business, I guess we'd call it, and as Bo said, the keeper of that legacy. Thanks for joining us, Eve.
Thank you. That's a lot of pressure. Nothing to do with it.
I always mean to make my introductions simple and direct, and always end up being flowery and long. But and then second, I'd like to introduce Jeff Berry, best known to tiki fans out there as Beachbum Berry. Jeff is probably more responsible, actually more responsible than any other person for bringing tiki culture back to life. It had spent a few decades there, all but dead, in the world, and he did the research and to bring it back, not just bring back the notion and the idea, but also the recipes for the drinks, and publish them in various books, including Sipping Safari, Groglog, and Toxica, and his masterpiece, Potions of the Caribbean, which came out a few years ago. And he actually did what recently, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, what no sane historian or journalist would do, was put his money where his mouth was and opened a tiki bar of his own in New Orleans called Latitude 29. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, thank you for the kind words, Robert.
And last but not least, we have Brian Miller, who has been a tiki accolade for over a decade at this point, more than a decade. He was one of the leading figures in the cocktail renaissance that gripped the country about 20 to 15 years ago, working at such famous bars as Pegu Club and Death and Company, and then became interested in tiki drinks and started spreading the religion of that at places like Eleuteria. Then he founded a roving tiki event called Tiki Mondays with Brian Miller that was hosted by various bars over its life. And then most recently opened the Polynesian, which is the most grand tiki bar that New York has seen in probably 50 years. Hello, Brian. Nice to see you.
Hey, Robert. Thanks for the kind words.
Yeah. So I think, we should start at the beginning, where tiki had its origins. Most people agree that tiki began in California and was mainly brought about by two men, Don Beach, who started Don the Beachcomber, a bar in LA, and Victor Bergeron, who started Trader Vic's and was inspired by Don Beach up in Oakland. So what was it like growing up, Eve, as part of that family? I mean, did you pour Mai Tais over your breakfast cereal every morning?
Well, I mean, you don't do that at 9 years old, but still don't do it today.
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of fun, but I mean, quite honestly, it become like later on in drinking age, like to sit at the bar was just like a big no-no, because like someone would like call my dad, so in a way I kind of got to know Trader Vic's operationally later on when I worked in Trader Vic's and started doing openings. But my grandfather our connection was more about his love of art, and he was an artist also in later years. Also, being a kid, he dug up fossils, and of course I was enamored with that. But the restaurant was really fun. Growing up in a restaurant family, going in through the kitchen and going out to dinner, you would kind of like leave the table and go run around or something, and hang out in the hat check with Claudette. I don't know. Everyone knows Claudette. She made the New York Times, by the way, 57 years as a host at Trader Vic's. So,
is that so? Oh, wow. Amazing.
Yeah, New York Times.
So were you aware growing up? I mean, we all grow up as kids and we don't really pay attention to, what our parents or grandparents do. We think it's boring. Did you understand what the legacy of the family was, or did it take until you were an adult to really come to a full realization of that?
It's kind of funny. It's so I have a restaurant background in other areas other than Trader Vic's, and then I was asked to join in '97, and I moved to Dubai and working at Trader Vic's, because you had the rise, the fall, the resurrection, and the redemption of of tiki. And so in working in Dubai in '97, it was kind of actually on the upswing. And I went onward in working with the staff and seeing everyone with the love of what we do, it kind of ignited something in me of pride and so forth. So I went on to openings. And then what also got me more interest in the historical aspect was when I was in a restaurant at Trader Vic's Palo Alto, and they were putting original photos up on the wall. And I met Otto von Stroheim, and I started learning that, oh, people are really into this. But I started going, oh my God, we're starting to lose our history. So I went back and I scanned all the photos and I put copies up and I kept the originals, and I've been kind of digitizing and scanning and learning, trying to preserve the history. And then onward meeting Jeff Berry and now Brian Miller, you know, and more and more, and learning the history with Sven Kirsten, kind of like a different angle. So I have an angle from the inner workings, and then they have the angle of that has really opened my eyes, quite honestly. I was too close to the subject, I think.
For those who don't know, who aren't tiki aficionados out there, but Sven Kirsten and Otto von Stroheim are two tiki authorities and historians and aficionados. Back in the 90s, when tiki was not popular and almost forgotten, it was really the flame was kept lit by just a kind of a handful of layman historians who decided to preserve this culture and celebrate it and explore it. I mean, Jeff, you know all about this. You were one of those people. Most of those people were clustered in LA. It was not their job to be tiki historians. Obviously, tiki historian is not a profession that existed, 20 years
Doesn't pay
ago.
well.
But you were in the film business, Jeff. Now, but you developed an early interest in tiki, even as a child. Now, tell me how that came about, and what was it about it that appealed to you?
Well, this is sort of putting the cart before the horse as far as the Brooklyn historical look at tiki goes. One of the things that happened in the third decade of tiki's popularity, which would be the 1960s, tiki places weren't called tiki places. They were just Polynesian themed restaurants and bars. And they served tropical drinks, exotic drinks. It wasn't called tiki drinks. And for food, they served basically Cantonese food, just New York style, if you will, if you're from the certain generation, Chinese food. So around the 60s, Chinese restaurateurs realized that they could make a lot more money by cashing in on this Polynesian trend if they just hung some Polynesian decor in their Chinese restaurants. They were already serving the food. All they had to do now was find a bartender who could make the drinks. And and that's really what Brooklyn looked like in the 60s as far as Polynesian places goes. There were a lot of them were Chinese restaurants that just sort of like jumped on that bamboo bandwagon, if you will. To get more to your question, one of the places that my parents took me to, my dad was from the Bronx and my mom was from Brooklyn. So the food of my people was Chinese food, Cantonese food. That's what they loved. And they were out in the San Fernando Valley in California, and they heard about this place that served Cantonese food, Chinese food. It was called Ah Fang's Chinese restaurant on Encino, in Encino on Ventura Boulevard. I was about 8, maybe. This would have been like 1965, 6, 7, somewhere in the mid 60s. The Ah Fang's restaurant had originally been called the Bora Bora Room. It opened in 1960, and they spent so much money on decor, amazing indoor waterfalls and beautiful art and aquariums and outrigger canoes hanging from the ceiling and all. Every square inch of the place was done up. They spent so much money on decor they couldn't recoup their investment, and they went broke. Benson Fong, who had a chain of Cantonese restaurants in Los Angeles, basically hermit crabbed into the place. He didn't change the decor. He just served Ah Fang's food and kept the bartender who was making Polynesian drinks, faux Polynesian drinks. So long story short, in order to get into the dining room where I was allowed, you had to go through the bar. And the bar was basically, it out-Disneyed Disney. And it was like a Hollywood movie set. To walk through when you're walking through the bar, I looked behind the bar, there were no bottles on the back bar. There's no mirror, there's none of the usual stuff you saw. What there was a little miniature diorama, a model diorama of a tropical island with cabins on stilts and a fake resin sea and sand, palm trees, which they probably got at a model railroad store. And then the backdrop was a dawn to dusk lighting change diorama from sunrise to sunset to the night sky and all that. And that's basically what ruined my life. Was that and there was just that's what led me down the rabbit hole. And when I got old enough to drink, I started to seek these places out. That was back in 1980, when snakes still walked, dinosaurs ruled the earth.
And were there at that time, were there many of them left in the area?
Afong's had become a Mexican restaurant called Merrick's. And most of the other grand Polynesian palaces, which you have to remember, and Eve can tell you about this because that's what her restaurants are, these places were, for the most part, and Afong's was a suburban restaurant, but most of these places were 2-3 stories, 85 employees. This was white tablecloth fine dining back in the 60s. This was like the height of chic. This is where you put on your best clothes and you had to give the kids a babysitter and you spent your week's salary at a place like Trader Vic's or the Islander in Beverly Hills. All these places were gone except for Vic's in Beverly Hills by 1980. And there were just a few little neighborhood places left, which is what I got to experience and what made me realize that if I wanted to keep drinking these drinks, which were the only good drinks to be had in 1980, if you went to the most expensive steakhouse or continental restaurant in town in Los Angeles in 1980 and you ordered an old fashioned, it would be made in a blender. And same thing with a daiquiri. Everything was made in a blender. Everything came out of a can. Everything sucked. The disconnect between the kitchen and the bar in these places was unbelievable. Only at Trader Vic's or at little tiki bars were you getting what we now call craft cocktails, made with fresh citrus and house-made infusions and syrups and liquor balanced out. So that's what basically took over my life, was trying to figure out how to do that.
It's interesting that you refer to them, even as they are made back then, as craft cocktails. Now, Brian, when you were in New York, in the aughts, and making craft cocktails at Death and Company and Pegu Club, I mean, everyone was very serious about drinks back then. But they thought of craft cocktails as, a Sazerac, Ramos Gin Fizz, a Manhattan, a Martini, an old fashioned as was made the old way. They did not think of tiki drinks that way. You were one of the lone voices in New York. New York was very resistant to tiki for a long time. Can you tell me what that was like, trying to convince people tiki drinks were good?
You're right. It was very resistant. I mean, when I first got interested in tiki was being at Pegu Club, and Audrey had all these books behind the bar, and I saw Beachbum berries, I saw the grog log behind the bar, and I was really curious about that. And my infinite stupidity, I didn't think Beachbum berry was a person that was alive. Like I just assumed.
It does sound like an invented mascot of some kind.
I have a tendency to believe that people that are dead are actually alive. But when I got really interested in it was at Death and Company, and I remember, we were known there as like the brown and stirred bar. That was the thing. We were popular for classic cocktails, and I remember, after getting over my hesitation with trying to create cocktails, I decided I wanted to try to do create a tiki cocktail. And at first, I kind of thought, like, who the hell am I to create a tiki cocktail? And I wanted to go with Rittenhouse Rye, because that was the spirit that everybody was using. Rittenhouse Rye had, taken on a new life. Rye itself was really becoming popular. And my goal was, I'm going to take something that people today think is, the best thing in the world, and I'm going to put it in a tiki drink, which they all think is the worst thing in the world. And so I created the Gantz Tomb, which was obviously my homage to Dawn the Beachcomber, but I put Rittenhouse Rye in it, and I mixed it with Gosling's rum, and For some people out there, they really love the drink, and that's great. I love the drink as well, but I'm always surprised when people remember the first tiki drink I ever created. And it was just a way of approaching people that wanted classic cocktails and like wanted to just drink Rittenhouse Rye straight. I was like, fuck you, I'm gonna make a tiki drink with it, and I'm gonna make you love it. And it was more of a challenge, and that's always been my kind of approach to tiki, is that sometimes people think, you know, as Dave Wondern sometimes says, it's like a syrupy sweet cocktail used to pin co-eds on a bed. But like, I wanted tiki to get the respect that it deserved. And I used to joke with friends that were like, oh, you and your 12 ingredient cocktails. And I was like, yeah, I think it's really cute the way you guys balance 3 ingredients. I was like, why don't you take the training wheels off and try to balance 12? And that's was my approach. And I just kind of became obsessed with tiki cocktails because they were something that people weren't making. And so it was just a new challenge. And that, and as bartenders, especially in New York, we were always looking for new challenges, especially at Death and Company. There wasn't a day that I worked behind that bar that somebody wasn't working on something. And there was obviously an audience that was dying for something new, something different, something original. And so I just, you know, kept working at it. And, you know, after a while, like when I started Tiki Mondays, it was more about paying homage to the past. And I just ripped through everything in Bum's books and brought those to life because no one had seen them before. So there's no need to throw my ego on the table. It was like, cool, here's a bunch of people that came before me that have made amazing drinks. I was like, here, you should try these. And also just honestly trying to get people to read those books as well. Like I've always said, throughout the entire history of classic cocktail books, I think Sip and Safari is #1, if not in the top 5 of my favorite cocktail books of all time.
Eve, you mentioned that you joined Trader Vic's in the 90s and you were in Dubai. Now, Tiki was still popular in that area of the world, and it also was still popular in corners of Europe, but in the US, it was on the wane. When things started to happen in the aughts, the little tiki bars and tiki bartenders such as Brian, were you aware that cocktail bartenders were starting to get back interested in this genre?
I came back to the US in 2001, and I didn't really see too much going on as far as other bars. Actually, Actually, I took a step away from Trader Vic's and I did work somewhere else. I know, ooh, family. Anyways, I did work at a place, and I could still sense the bartender there because I started putting a mojito on the menu. It seemed to go with, and I put a Papa Hemingway. And the bartender thought I was going to go in there and start doing syrupy drinks with umbrellas and whistles, bells and whistles. And I kind of actually stick to like the real classics in the tiki genre, or the tropical, because you have to think about where it goes. I just wanted to mention, it's just recently where I find it kind of like with the craft tiki cocktails that everyone's searching for more and more exotic ingredients. And so, like how many elixirs and what's it called? Bitters and different things are going on. But I just wanted to circle back to Jeff Berry because I cross-reference always. I refer to your books, by the way, all the time. I don't put them on a shelf. There's a stack of certain books that I look at. So I have like the Trader Vic's, I have beverage guides from when I was doing trainings. I have Jeff Berry's books, and then I have other cocktail books, so just.
That's interesting. It goes full circle. I'm sure when you started your research, Jeff, Trader Vic's books was one of the few books out there about tiki cocktails, and now Trader Vic's is referring to your books. I know that there's an interesting story when you two met, Jeff and Brian. It was at Death and Company. One of you want to tell that tale?
Bum, you know, the elder statesman. I'll let you go first, or do you want me to go with it? Or?
Yeah, it was Jim Meehan over at PDT had asked me to come up and talk about tropical drinks to New York bartenders, and we did, and we served some drinks, and little did I know that the cream of New York's craft scene was there. I mean, Brian was there, Audrey Saunders of Pegu, and Julie Reiner of Flatiron, and now Clover Club, of course. And all the way down the line, it was a little intimidating because there I was making, you know, my little things with whatever I was doing. Anyway, Brian came up to me, who I had not met before, afterwards, and said, "Hey, you should come to Death and Company tonight because we served these kind of drinks." I said, "Really? Okay." I was supposed to go to Pegu Club. I was supposed to go to Flatiron. I was supposed to go to all the heavy hitter, nationally known cocktail bars because I was from Los Angeles. In Los Angeles in 2008, when this meeting occurred, craft cocktails were science fiction. Nobody was making them. No craft cocktails in LA. And we had heard reports, you know, people would come, friends of mine would come back from New York and go, "I went to this place and I had a martini made with Earl Grey tea." And there was they were all talking about Pegu Club drinks, like the tantric sidecar. It had 5 different ingredients. And I went, "Whoa, 5 ingredients." So this was like a big deal for me to go to all these bars and check them out. It was like going to the moon or something. So my first stop was Death and Company, which is not easy to get into. And Brian was kind enough to let some friends of mine in because we had a long night ahead of us. Sat down. First thing Brian made me was the first real, credible zombie I'd ever had in a bar. Don the Beachcomber zombie in a bar, his own take on it. And it kind of like, what? It was a real amazing moment. And then came a Nui Nui, another Beachcomber drink. And then came some of Brian's originals. And then Joaquin Simo was there, and he made some of his originals. I believe the Punky Monkey was one of them.
Yeah.
So, and I was like, I couldn't believe this was happening because I'd only made these drinks, you know, drinks this good off of recipes that I had found in books or people had told me, or, you know, at Trader Vic's or the Tiki Tea in Los Angeles. But these were on a different level. The precision that they were made with, as Brian said, balancing out 12 ingredients, the precision and the newness. They were using 21st century ingredients that were not known back in the 1950s and were not used in any of the recipes I had. And so drink after drink after drink. Long story short, I got off the stool to go to my next stop, and I got out to the sidewalk, and my knees buckled, and I grabbed a lamppost, just like the old cartoons, and that was it for the night. No Pegu Club for me. It's like,
all right, so I guess you must have been surprised. Were you surprised that you found good tiki drinks in New York at that year?
Absolutely. I was shocked because I had been in New York a year prior to that. I was being interviewed by someone at the New York Times, and we were sitting in a bar, and I was complaining that you couldn't get a decent zombie in New York to save your life, whereas on the West Coast, people were making steps towards trying to recreate these things. And I think Brian read that, and that may be the reason I was serving zombie the first round.
Yeah, that was, I remember reading that article because I think it was around the same time that Sip and Safari was coming out. And that was kind of the basis or the inspiration for the one and only consulting job I ever did at Elitaria, which was they were doing Indian food. And I was like, well, great, let's serve rum drinks with Indian food. That'll be great. And, you know, I just absorbed Sip and Safari. That was a book that I went down a rabbit hole and just became completely obsessed with. And learning the zombie in that book and learning about Don's Mix, which was a real eye-opener. And I just remember when Bum came in, Joaquin and I were like two little school children. We were like, oh my God, Beachbum Barry's coming, blah, blah, blah. We had all our books. We were ready to have him sign every book that we had of his. And we just ping-ponged back and forth. It wasn't about like one person showcasing the other. It was like, cool, Joaquin, I'll make a drink, then you make a drink for him. And unfortunately, Bum, had to drink all of them. But the first one I did was a zombie, and I put it in front of him, and I was like, I've been waiting 2 years to do this, to put this drink in front of you. And it's such an iconic drink. It is what I would call my desert island drink, because it would make me forget I'm on a desert island. But I remember I tasted one when I went to Smuggler's Cove, and I remember tasting Martin's, and I was like, I'm in the ballpark. Like, I remember it being similar to mine, and I was like, okay, cool. It was like being a minor league player in baseball and being like, cool, I can play in the majors. I can do this. And putting that drink in front of Bum, and I've worked on that drink over and over again to constantly try to make it taste better and better, depending on the ingredients, whether it's cinnamon bark or cinnamon, making Don's mix better, finding the right kind of rums to make that drink better, or more to my liking. It was just, that was such a seminal moment. And I remember, if you look at the books that I have, that I asked Bum to sign all of them, and you could just tell the book in the beginning was like, one of the highest compliments was, Brian, you're the next Don the Beachcomber. And then, like, as he signed more and more books, the writing kind of tailed off and became less and less legible and intelligible. But that was something that was just really, it was a seminal moment for me, meeting Bum for the first time.
So Eve, because of the work of Jeff and Brian and people like them, there's like a full-fledged Tiki Revival, which has been going on for 10 years now, and was completely unpredictable. I don't think anybody could have seen this coming. And for a long time, obviously, Trader Vic's was like one of the only people left on the block, and it must have been pretty lonely there for a while. Now we have tiki bars in like every city, every mid-sized city, some small towns. What do you think of this? I mean, and how has it does it cause Trader Vic's to do business in a different way at all, or adjust?
Well, it's with COVID, I don't really know how to answer that right now, but
so, pre-COVID, I mean, all their business models have changed.
Quite honestly, it's not competition. It gives us more respect, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Jeff. Because even with, for a long time there with my friends, they're, oh, Trader Vic's, oh, isn't that a steakhouse? Isn't, I would just get, so I never even brought it up with people because I knew what we did. And then now it's, you got to keep yourself humble, but it's just nice to get some respect. And also, I just remember when Forbidden Island opened up, actually kind of rolling back to Conga Lounge when Michael Thanos did, we did the anniversary of the Mai Tai, which is coming up, where they made it the official cocktail of Oakland, California, where it was invented. And then later on, he opened up Forbidden Island, and it was just, well, he was also a really good customer at Trader Vic's in Emeryville, which is San Francisco Bay. But it was just nice to have a little company. And then when Smuggler's Cove opened, it's kind of like we've got this triangle in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have Trader Vic's, Forbidden Island, and Smuggler's Cove. And now we have Tiki. And it's just a great camaraderie amongst all of us. And then, got Pagan Idol, Zombie Village. So the Bay Area, again, is a hub of Tiki going on. And it's really nice. It's just nice to have some company.
Yeah, nice not to be alone. For those who don't know, Forbidden Island in Alameda was, sorry, not from California, was the first important modern tiki bar of the modern era in that Bay Area. And Smuggler's Cove, another important modern tiki bar in San Francisco. which helped raise the profile of tiki in that city. Going back to,
add, though,
yes?
is that we are a restaurant too, and so it's a lot of work. You know,
Yes.
sometimes people wonder why we don't open up everywhere all over the United States. Is because we, you know, food and beverage, and Jeff will know this, and this is our brother in arms, my brother in arms. It's you got to make the combination right, you know, between the size of your restaurant, the size of your bar, what are you serving, who's going to like it. And you know, if we went into a neighborhood in Portland, and Portland does think we are perceived as a franchise restaurant that's, you know, so, you know, they want craft restaurant with chickens named Colin, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone's seen Portlandia, you know, but you know, so, you know, I just, in our defense, is there's a lot of history in our food too, along with the drinks.
Yeah, the food can be overlooked because there's so much of focus on the drinks, you know, and by people like me. But food has always been a big component of the tiki world. Both of your bars, the Polynesian and Latitude, you have tremendous food programs. I mean, was that always important that you have food for the drinks?
Well, in our case at Latitude, there was no way to get a liquor license in New Orleans if you weren't what they call a 50-50 license. It was 50% bar and 50% food, and they hold you to that. I mean, they have people coming in and checking out your receipts and all that. That's simply because there were just too many bars in New Orleans. You know, the city fathers and mothers said, no, we're not going to have any more bars devoted exclusively to alcohol. So in order to open, we had to be a restaurant. There was no choice involved. If we had our choice, we would serve no food whatsoever, or just have a little fryer in the back, because that's what, as Eve will tell you, and as Brian will tell you, he had a full service restaurant too. That's most of your headaches and most of your overhead.
That's an understatement.
Right?
That is the anchor that sinks the ship. I would say, I mean, I wanted food. I thought my partners would hold up their end of the bargain a little better than they did. But I mean, just my ethos throughout bars is like, look, you got to have food to keep the asses upright in seats, to be honest. And especially at the Polynesian, where we were able to blend anywhere between 2.5 and 4 ounces of booze in a cocktail, you got to have good food. I wasn't so fortunate in that way, but I would say that, I mean, for me, going into even Elitaria, when I went in there, you know, I was like working with a top-end chef, Akhtar Nawab, and I was like, I've got to come with my A game. Did I ever expect the cocktails to outshine the food? Never. Even in my own bar, I did not expect my cocktails to outshine the food, but that ended up being the case. I guess for me, I was very lucky that most of my customers or guests were alcoholics and were able to handle their alcohol better than I would have anticipated. But that's kind of I think, not really a goal, but one of the beautiful things in working with tiki cocktails is to take, I mean, you know, you look at the zombie is like 3 ounces of 4 ounces of rum, plus a little velvet falernum, plus some absinthe. I mean, that's a pretty intense cocktail, even for classic cocktail connoisseurs. And to be able to blend those things where the most likely scenario, and it's probably the same at Latitude 29, is people like, come on, I'll have another drink, I'll have another drink, I'll have another drink. And then when they stand up, that's when they realize what has hit them. So I kind of take some pride in being able to serve 3 ounces of booze to a person and have them go, wow, that's great, I'll have another.
Well, Brian, you mentioned the zombie, and this is an interesting panel in that we have two people here who, better than anyone, represent the two most famous tiki drinks ever invented. There's the Mai Tai, which was invented by your grandfather, Eve. And there's the zombie, the original recipe of which, Jeff, you uncovered after long and arduous work. And both of these drinks, while famous, had been bastardized for many decades because people didn't really know what the recipe was, or didn't care, or took shortcuts. Well, let's start with the Mai Tai. Eve, I imagine it's still one of the most popular drinks in all your restaurants. Was it a battle over the years to make people understand that it was a good drink, that this is the drink, not the thing that you had in Hawaii?
Oh, I would like to get over to Hawaii and teach them how to make a Mai Tai.
People have
they've gotten a lot better.
Yeah. I don't know. I cringe when I see the photos online, because I Google it sometimes just to see, because, there's always just some syrupy. I kind of look at the Mai Tai because it's really a refreshing drink that has to be shaken. And I know my grandfather always said, don't skimp on the ice, because I just see a lot of people you can visually see how syrupy it is, because it's been just kind of poured over big ice cubes, and there's no marination, I guess, I've actually, there was a bartender in Beirut, and when he was new, and he's all, well, I'll show you my Mai Tai. And I was like, harumph. And then there was another time, notably, I usually stay out of the hiring process because I have a little bit of a head on me. We do openings. And then I remember actually it was in 2001, and I just came back from like training. I train like the lounge staff, and I work, the bartenders, it's just too hard. It's daunting to train bartenders. This bartender that they were interviewing to be the bar manager of a location here in the United States is like, so we were training them. I think actually the main thing that's changed over that, now bartenders are measuring. If anyone's noticed that. When I came back to the United States, I noticed that bartenders thought it was just stupid to measure, especially when you're getting into other drinks. And so he's like, well, I'll change all of that. And I was just like, walk away, just walk away. So that's another aspect I like to see with bartenders of jiggers are popular now. Who knew?
Jeff, I mean,
Sorry.
Before the Mai Tai came along, the zombie was, the it drink. But one of the problems with the history of tiki is that the bar owners and bartenders wouldn't share their recipes. And so when the bars went and the bartenders died, the recipes went with them. And so nobody really, when you started researching, nobody knew what was actually in a zombie except rum. They knew rum was in there, and a lot of it. Can you briefly tell the story of how you finally found the real original recipe?
Sure. I've been trying zombies since 1980, when I was first allowed to go to Trader Vic's and Tiki Tea and drink. And I never had one that gave me any kind of indication of why it was such a famous drink. It was famous for years, as it was the cosmopolitan of its day. Radio comedians would make jokes about it, travel writers write about it. It was huge. There were premixes, like you can buy a bottled zombie as early as 1940. It was huge, and everybody had to be able to serve something resembling one. But every single cocktail book, vintage cocktail book that I came across, every magazine article that had a recipe, every possible place I could go and try to recreate one, it was a terrible drink. It was like, why was this drink so popular? Could it only have been because it had so much rum in it? What was it just a punch in the face to the anti-saloon league after Prohibition? I don't know. It was finally, after having bad zombies, and of course everywhere I went to get one, it was terrible. Having bad zombies for well nigh 20 years, this lady named Jennifer Santiago from West Virginia was kind enough to send me a Xerox copy of her father's 1937 Beachcomber recipe booklet, which he had in his shirt pocket. As you intimated, Robert, this was top secret. These were industrial secrets. Nobody wanted anybody else to know how to make a proper Beachcomber drink because that was their passport to employment. So they kept their recipes very, very literally close to their chests, right in their shirt pocket. So I got this Xerox, and lo and behold, it was dated from like 1937, and there was something that said Zombie Punch, and these were all typewritten little pages. It's handwritten in fountain pen next to the Zombie Punch. It said new, or no, old. It said old recipe. So it's probably from 34 when Don's opened, and everything in there was you could recreate except something called Don's Mix. It said a half ounce of Don's Mix, and I looked at that. I was like, "What the hell is Don's Mix?" It was like one step forward, two steps back. And there were other things in code, but they were fairly easy to crack. Like falernum, he called it Munroloff, which is falernum spelled backwards. So I was like, okay, I can figure that out. But there were things like Don's Dashes #4, Spices #2, Don's Mix. Finally, I had to get somebody else's parents' Beachcomber little handwritten thing from 1950s, and they had Don's Mix, 2 parts grapefruit juice, 1 part Spices #4. I was like,
oh no,
Spices #4. So then I had to figure out what Spices #4 was, and 2 years after that, I met a guy named Bob Esmino, who was the bar manager for several Kon-Tiki restaurants. Which was they were the chief competition to Trader Vic's. Trader Vic's were all in Hilton hotels around the country, and the Sheratons had Kon-Tikis, another upscale fine dining place. But they stole all their bartenders from Don the Beachcomber. So I asked Bob just on a whim when I was interviewing, have you ever heard of something called Spices #4? And he goes, oh yeah, sure, yeah, that was the cinnamon syrup. So boom, okay. Now there were no recipes for cinnamon syrup out there, so I had to figure that out. But the process from getting that one booklet with the actual real recipe on it to actually being able to make a drink at home as a 37 Zombie was 5 years, maybe.
5 years.
Yeah, and it was shoe leather. You had to meet people who were there and who were making them. I was fortunate for once in my life to be in the right place at the right time on the West Coast when these guys were still alive.
Well, the world thanks you, Jeff.
Yeah.
We're going to start taking some questions now from the audience. Eve, somebody out there wants to know if the art behind you is Vic's art.
It is. The balloon painting is used to hang in his dining room. And then the little funny sunrise one is just a goofy one that is actually one of my favorites. He used to go duck hunting, and to me that's imagined like when you go duck hunting, it's early in the morning. The other one is my aunt. She painted with him. She's an amazing artist. And then down below, there's one by Fleur Cowes. She was a Texan, and she started the magazine, Flair magazine. She was an amazing person. And that was a painting that she gave to him.
Also for your Eve, as we mentioned earlier, there are a lot of locations of Trader Vic's in the Middle East. What do you think it is about Middle Eastern culture that makes Tiki popular?
Well, it started in '93. There was, so Dubai, well, when I was there, it wasn't like it is now. It was actually kind of funky. I really enjoyed it, actually. So Dubai, when you're in Dubai, that connection between England and, so our Trader Vic's London and the restaurant that we had in Abu Dhabi was the first one. And so the connection was made, and we really got into Dubai early before it all exploded. And so we hit the ground running in '94, early '94, Trader Vic's Abu Dhabi opened up. And we were kind of like, again, lone kids on the block, but extremely popular because you could get a really good drink. And then in November, Trader Vic's in Dubai opened up. And so that's '94. So I started in '97, and I couldn't believe how busy it was. And we're still really busy. I'm very thankful that they let us decor and they let us do what we do best. And they just said, you have a partnership with a sponsor there, your business. And so we were in a hotel, But then, you know, they just said, have at it, do what you do. And so we just have a really good reputation there. And by the way, it's not the zombie there. The drink of the day there, which is probably as strong as the zombie that you're describing, is the Tiki Puka Puka. And it's, I had two once and I went home and I had to put my foot on the floor. So, but it's popular there, and we do well. We also have London. We have a restaurant in Munich, Tokyo, Bangkok, Atlanta, which is closed right now. And so we're always open to new things, but you know, we have a good foothold in there. And then when we train, our bartenders measure and they maintain the integrity of what we do.
Jeff, somebody asked, is there an iconic drink recipe that you published initially early on that you later learned was completely wrong?
Oh, well, that would be the zombie. Yeah.
Okay, back to the zombie.
In the grog log, that was 94. I put out the first little Xerox version. 98 was the little spiral bound thing. Even as late as 98, I could not find a decent recipe for the zombie, so I just used the one that was the least objectionable. It was something that had apple brandy and passion fruit and apricot brandy. I think it was okay. You could kind of drink it, but I later found out, okay, all these zombies are wrong. I didn't know that at the time. I just thought one of these must be the real thing. This one tastes the least crappy, so maybe it's it. And in the second book, Intoxica, in 2002, I found a little barbecue guide by a guy named Louis Spivak. It was like a little spiral-bound barbecue guide published in 1950. He was a friend of Don Beach, and he had a bunch of pictures of Don in his backyard in the San Fernando Valley. And he said, here is Don's original recipe that he gave to me. And he says, anybody who says I didn't create this drink is a liar. Signed, Don. I'm like, wow, that's great. So I tried it. It was good. It was for no relation to the actual zombie, but it was a good drink. It was pineapple, lime, lemon, passion fruit, 151 Demerara rum, a little bit of brown sugar dissolved in there. I thought, okay, this is it. I found it. And then only to discover when I got the recipe booklet from Richard Santiago that it was probably but completely bogus. There's nothing matched up, no DNA matched up between that recipe and the actual zombie. So
yeah, because isn't there like 3 versions that at least you put in Sip and Safari, which was the 34, which is the one we all kind of know, and then the 50 was that Spivak, and then there was a 56.
The 56 was from a girly magazine called Cabaret. And it was like, you know, babes and booze, basically. And they had a picture of Don the Beachcomber, and he says, this is the real thing. This is the actual drink that I invented. And it's the DNA of that drink it matches up to the 1934 in a way that the 1950 doesn't. The 34 is still better, but the thing is, Don was a tinkerer. Several people who knew him told me that he never stopped changing his recipes. And that 56 was 20 years after the original, and he kept the basic DNA, you know, but no mention of cinnamon syrup in that one.
Right.
There was maraschino in it, but it still had the same kind of, you could see the evolution. You could see how it might have been third generation.
The George Lucas of cocktails.
Brian, someone wants to know, which version of the zombie did you serve Jeff when he came to Death and Company that first time?
I'm an advocate for the 34.
So you did the original, the 34.
Yeah, I did the original. I've served, you know, when I did Tiki Mondays at Mai Tai, I actually did a flight of the zombies. So I did the 34, the 50, and the 56. During the winter time, I actually would serve the hot zombie, which is nothing like any of the others. I mean, it's got passion fruit. I think the only thing that I added to it was absinthe, because I think like passion fruit or Lilicoy and absinthe just really go great together. I remember that that first lecture that Bum gave at
PDT.
PDT, that Bum gave like an abbreviated version of the zombie, and I remember being really pissed because I was like, fuck this, we're not making an abbreviated version, let's make the real thing, it's not that hard. And it's such an amazing drink, like the depth of that cocktail with 8 to 9 ingredients that are in it. It's just like, you know, as a bartender, we love challenges, you know, and to recreate that drink was such an amazing challenge. And, you know, for me, I've been very lucky enough that a lot of people that have tasted my zombie have been like, holy shit, this is like one of the best zombies I've had, or this is one I really like. And it's just such a complex drink, and trying to get the rums to recreate it is really hard. And I will say this now, and I don't say this in any other forum, but to me, the secret ingredient of the rums that are paired together is the Rondell Barlito 3-star. I think that to me is the doors of rum. Like, it's so original and it's so different, and there's nothing like it. That for me, that's my key ingredient. That's my Puerto Rican rum when I make that drink.
Speaking of tiki drinks being difficult or not difficult, somebody asked, in this time when many of us don't feel comfortable going into a crowded bar, but we still want tiki drinks, how can you make tiki or tiki-esque cocktails at home without breaking the bank? Some of these require a lot of ingredients. What do you think, Brian? You got any advice for this person?
I think rum, to get a delicious rum, is far less expensive than, say, like a tequila or a mezcal or some of the whiskeys out there. I think to get quality rum is really inexpensive. Look, we got nothing but time, you know, right now. So I think it's just trying to honor the people that came before you, people like Trader Vic and people like Don. It's like, I'm not trying to take credit for anything that they do. Those guys are, I'm not a religious man, but they're as close to gods as I can imagine, and just trying to honor their legacy of what they do. I don't believe in simple tiki drinks. There might be such a thing, not the way that I believe it. I think these drinks are complex, they're balanced. To make tiki drinks is like going to the gym. You go to the gym with someone who's stronger than you, and tiki drinks are stronger than most of us. So it's like, if you want to try to recreate them, you know, follow in their footsteps. There's nothing that I've ever done or accomplished in this industry that isn't some sort of Kevin Bacon 6 degrees of separation from Beachbum Berry, Trader Vic, or On the Beachcomber.
I'd like to point out that the Mai Tai actually isn't very hard.
Mai Tai, the Mai Tai is essentially, it's a daiquiri on steroids. Like,
yeah, so I would say, you know, make Mai Tais. Another suggestion, this may work depending on what city you're in. A lot of bars are struggling right now, and they're doing to-go cocktails in some cities, and they've also turned their bars into bottle shops, selling off their stock. And you can actually get some nice bargains on bottles by buying from these bars these days, and also help the bars out. So if there's a bar you like, the chances are they might have some bottles of rum and other ingredients for tiki drinks that you can get at a good price. Jeff,
we're doing
yes,
drinks in a mason jar, and we fill up the drink, and then you add the ice, put the lid on, and it becomes a shaker. Who knew?
Oh wow, that's great. Yeah, it's wonderful to see all the different kind of containers people put these things in as they go out. Jeff, somebody wants to know, one of your books at least has been republished in a very handsome hardcover edition, Sipping Safari. Is that going to happen to any of your other books?
Possibly. I think there's such a glut of tiki books out there now. Some of them good, some of them just basically plagiarizing what I've done. One of the good ones, just as a brief aside, people talking about how hard it is to make tiki drinks. And a good one, Chloe Frechette from Punch Magazine just came out with a book called Easy Tiki. Is actually quite good and has a lot of very accessible recipes in it. I won't mention the other books, but I think I feel like we're living in kind of like a post-literary world now, and most people seem to respond to the app I have, the Total Tiki app, which basically in one app has every recipe from all of the books, all 7 books. So that's probably the way to go. Maybe looking to develop that into more of a web-based subscription thing or something like that.
Yeah, I have that app. I use it all the time.
Thank you. And you've got your own app too, by the same.
Yeah, but no tiki drinks on it, except one of yours.
Mine.
The double Winchester is actually on the app. Anyway, Eve, another book question. Somebody wants to know if there are any plans or interest in writing or publishing a history of Trader Vic's, like a hardcover, like a beautiful.
I have approached Sven Kirsten. He's kind of like the godfather of tiki, and we have met up. We've done an outline. He's in Germany because he actually gets paid he's a cinematographer. And we just moved our warehouse, and so I moved most of the archive. It's behind me, you can't see it. It's a mess. So I'm scanning away, kids, and more has been revealed. It's kind of fascinating. So I would love to do a book. I'm kind of concerned about some of the images and everyone kind of getting on us, but
Well, there's possibly something in the works, and then you'll submit it to publishers.
As Jeff's been listening to this for a while.
Oh. Okay.
And so I'm amazed. I look at your book and I go, wow, because I'm reading your book, Jeff, and I just go, oh my God, that's a lot of work you put into that, man.
Right.
So maybe I should just do a picture book, just scan everything, just throw it in.
Oh, here's another COVID question, because COVID is the topic of the day. Does COVID spell the end of scorpion bowls? Scorpion bowls are large format drinks with many straws coming out of them. I mean, what do we do about them? Do we just shelve them for a while?
How about your social bubble?
Oh, what do you explain?
Well, you know how you have like your family, your social bubble, you have like your family, so I guess or we could make them into dog bowls or.
So everybody who would be drinking from the bowls. So I guess feel confident.
Maybe kind of, I haven't seen, everything changes every single day. So we're doing to go. We've set up. I'm talking here in California in Emeryville, and we do to-go cocktail, to-go foods. We keep on expanding on that. We've moved a shipping container out to the parking lot where we have tables and chairs in this one area of the parking lot. We put tiki poles. We've actually bought some outdoor grass, palm trees. We're trying to make it look nice. Somebody complained that it's not tiki enough, but whatever. So people can order their to-go and sit out there, because we're in a hot spot, I guess, in the Bay Area. So we do the best we can, and our restaurants are opening up slowly overseas with social distancing and safe practices. In the Middle East, who knew? Because people wore their masks and they, didn't go out to big pool parties on Memorial Day weekend. So,
yeah. Here's a question. Interesting. Are there any major female figures in tiki history? I would say we have one right here, Eve. But perhaps Jeff, you could speak to this. We've been talking a lot about Don Beach and Trader Vic and men. Are there women in the history?
Yes, definitely. Possibly the reason that we're talking about Don the Beachcomber today is because of Sunny Sun, who was his wife and who bankrolled Don the Beachcomber Incorporated. She was the business person that he wasn't. If it wasn't for her, he might have spent the rest of his days in a little tiny 40-seat bar in a little hotel lobby in Hollywood making his drinks and tinkering with them. She's the one who built his empire and really put tiki on the map until Victor Bergeron came along and really cemented it. Frances Langford, very interesting entrepreneur, business owner. She had a place called the Outrigger in Florida, where lots of movie stars went, namely because she was friends with them. She was part of the Bob Hope USO tour during World War II. And so all of those people would come to Frances Langford's Outrigger, and they would drive their yachts. You know, they all had boats, and they would just go right up to the dock. There are many others. In fact, before COVID hit, I was going to do a seminar about all the influential women in Tiki with Michelle Trott, who brought a lot of very interesting things to say. There are others, but you have one thing that was a problem back then, to a much greater extent than now, is that women weren't allowed to become bartenders at least in Polynesian places, because their parents wouldn't allow it. Jennifer Santiago, the daughter of Richard, the maitre d' at the Beachcombers, whose little bar book sort of cracked all this recipe stuff wide open, she wanted to be a bartender. And he said, hell no, no way. You know, no daughter of mine is going to be a bartender. And that was kind of the prevailing attitude. It's very patriarchal, very sexist. And a lot of people didn't get a chance to shine. And now, in the 21st century, many of the really, really super talented, faux Polynesian drink makers are female, especially out in the Bay Area. You know, and some of them are owning bars and doing just amazing work.
I mean, obviously Shannon Mustafa is definitely a force to be reckoned with. And I mean, in some instances, and I don't mean this to sound like in a bad way, but like, look, you have, for what it's worth, you can say iconic characters like, take for example Martin Kate. Look, Rebecca is the one who makes the orgeat, which is really good.
Rebecca Kate, Martin's wife, partner.
And look, to me, one of the most powerful and influential women that I know in the tiki world is Anine. She is, you know, the question for you, I first asked you, Bum, when we met was, who would you rather be, Vic or Don? And you were like, I'm Don because I'm a terrible business person. and you know, because Vic was obviously much better at it. But Anine is, first time I saw her at Latitude 29, she had an army hat on, you know, like she was in the trenches. And I know for myself, I couldn't do the things that I do without the support of my girlfriend Cabell. And you know, she is amazing and helps me make better drinks and supports me in a way that no one else does. And I think over time, you're going to see more and more people, the influence that Shannon has on things. I think you're going to see plenty of people. I mean, Julie Reiner is someone who, you know, is a woman who stands out with tiki drinks. There are plenty of people out there, plenty of women out there that are supporting, and it's a big world, and sometimes it gets lost in this gentleman's club, you know, that we're in.
For the audience,
a bit to acknowledge Shirley Starvis, who helped my grandfather write his book. And my grandfather, actually, behind my grandfather was a lot of women. My grandmother, you know, named him. And then Alice Harth, she did our logo. So when he went in the 1950s, and then there's a ton of women, and then of course Claudette, 57 years in our company. Our company now is actually, our vice president is Raquel Rodriguez, and she's the vice president. Jimena Lopez is the regional director in Middle East and Africa. I do marketing, you know, so what else? There was a lot of women behind the scenes for my grandfather.
I just want to mention for the audience's benefit, Shannon Mustafa, who Brian mentioned, published a very successful and great book last year called Tiki. So you can check that out.
Yep.
We're going to wrap it up, and since this webinar has been sponsored by the wonderful Brooklyn Historical Society, I think it's only right we should end with Brooklyn. Brooklyn is not a city that, you know, leaps to the tip of your tongue when you think about tiki, but Jeff, do we have any tiki heritage here in Brooklyn? What do we got?
Oh, you do. The first Polynesian-themed place to get a drink opened up in the Upper East Side in 1931 during Prohibition. Serve alcohol. They served, it was called Hawaii Tropical Drinks. I have a photo here. I'll try and hold it up to the camera and see if anybody can make it out.
Shit.
This was the first place in New York and became very successful. And by 1935, they had one in Brooklyn. And I don't know exactly where in Brooklyn, but the place eventually, they served like papaya-based drinks, and eventually they added hot dogs because they were in a sort of a German neighborhood. And they're now Papaya King. New Yorkers know Papaya King.
In the morning. So that's how that started.
Yeah, so New York was before Don Beach, who started the whole thing out on the West Coast after Prohibition. There were, as I touched on at the top of the hour, many, many, many Cantonese places, Chinese places that went tiki in the 50s and 60s. A prime example is the movie set that was recreated in Goodfellas. So if you're looking for,
Yep.
the ones, some the mob burned down, others probably just changed over the years. But Queens really was where it was at, tiki was. Queens, especially because you had two World's Fairs out there. 1939 in the World's Fair, you had Monty Proser's Hurricane Bar, which introduced the zombie to New York by ripping off Don. By the way, he was sued later, Monty Proser. He opened the Copacabana nightclub.
That's right.
But he also opened up a chain of restaurants on the East Coast called Monty Proser's Beachcomber, stole Don's font, called everything. In fact, he used to tell people, hey, when you're out in Hollywood, go see our friend Don, go see our partner. He was shut down by Don's lawyers. So the 39 World's Fair out in Queens had that. The 64 World's Fair had two high-end white tablecloth Polynesian places. One was called the Restaurant of the Five Volcanoes. I don't remember what the other one, I think it was in the Hawaiian Pavilion. Now, there was a place, I don't know if it's still there, in Jackson Heights called the Dragon Seed, which was a perfect embodiment of that whole Cantonese to Polynesian switch. I went there in the 80s and took some pictures. I was looking through my files, couldn't find them, but this is before phone pictures, of course. It's, a lot of them, the decor was, they didn't have a lot of money, so it didn't look like Trader Vic's, it didn't look like much. Staten Island has I think it's called Jade Island.
Jade Island.
Yeah, Jade Island.
Went to, and there's an episode of his show that has it there. But Brooklyn, there was a lot of anonymous places mostly. You had to go to Queens, you had to go into Manhattan, which at one time, as very briefly, I know we're out of time, but Eve described today's scene in the San Francisco Bay Area of like 5, 6 big tiki places, all sort of rising tide lifting all boats, not really viewed as competition, but more as like helping everyone else by raising the profile of the genre. That was Manhattan. That was Midtown Manhattan in the 1950s and 60s. You had places like the Hawaii Kai, which is where the Winter Garden Theater was. It was like right above the Winter Garden, Broadway and 50th. You had Trader Vic's at the Plaza Hotel. The Gauguin Room, very high end on 2 Columbus Circle on the top of a modern art museum. The Luau 400, where Elizabeth Taylor and Marilyn Monroe and all these other people would go to, was a block long apparently with 85 employees. The guy who decorated it was the Ziegfeld Follies art director. So these were big white tablecloth fine dining places, and people would bounce from one to the other all through the late 50s and up through the mid 60s in New York. So New York wasn't always a tiki desert. And of course people like my parents would come in from Brooklyn to go to these places. So I guess that's some kind of bridge and tunnel connection, to New York tiki.
All right, well, thanks, Jeff. I think that'll wrap it up. Thanks everyone out there joining us to talk about cocktails. in the middle of Wednesday afternoon. Hopefully you're all ready for 5 o'clock when it rolls around. Thank you to the panelists, Eve, Jeff, Brian. Great to see your faces. Great to hear your voices. Thanks for joining us here at the Brooklyn Historical Society.
Nice to see you too, Robert. Thanks for having us.
All right. Everyone have a good day.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. I guess that's it.
Yeah.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.